We are here in Jaffrey, New Hampshire, the home of Mount Monadnock, and also it was the home of a very remarkable man, a man named Amos Fortune. Amos was a slave who had lived in Woburn, Massachusetts, which is just a little bit north of Boston. He was a tanner by trade. He bought his freedom by 1769. He also bought a slave that became his wife, actually two occasions. Two of his wives died. He eventually made his way out here to Jaffrey, where he was ordered out. And ordered out is something that is customarily done by the constable, which means basically, this was in 1781, September 13th. It basically means that the town won't provide for your needs. And he became quite a citizen of the town. He had a very successful tannery business. He had an apprentice. He was actively involved in the church, actively involved in the library here. He is buried at the church ground just up the street here. And his home is still standing. It was a very modest little house, which we'll be visiting very soon. And there's some books about his life. The date of his birth is not known, and he was already up in years when he came out here to Jaffrey. I believe he was in his 60s. Anyway, just a wonderful example of how a former slave, because of his hard work, his moral character, his integrity, he was able to get free, come out here, and become sort of a model citizen that today is probably the most well-known person in the town of from the town of Jaffrey. It was a sad thing about it, though. He wasn't able to, even though he paid all his taxes, he never paid his poll tax, which means that even though he was a free man, he wasn't allowed to vote. Thankfully, that's no longer the case. Just a little north of downtown Jaffrey, about 1.5 miles, 2 miles, is the Amos Fortune homestead, 1789. You see, it's a very modest looking little home, and he owned the acreage at about the brook here. I believe it's privately owned, and I think maybe be somebody residing in there, although it's a little past its prime. Anyway, we'll take a visit to the cemetery to find his gravesite. Just about 3 miles west of the village of Jaffrey, the center of Jaffrey, is the original burial ground that was part of the first meeting house. Meeting house, of course, is another name for a church. And here we find Amos Fortune and his wife. And I'll just read the inscription on the stone here, on the tomb. Sacred to the memory of Amos Fortune, who was born free in Africa, slave in America. He purchased liberty, professed Christianity, lived reputably, died hopefully November 17th, 1801, at the age of 91 years of age. And next to him was his wife, sacred to the memory of Violet, I hope I pronounced her name right, by sale, the slave of Amos Fortune, by marriage, his wife, by her, so I can't make it, fidelity, his friend, and she died his widow September 13th, 1802. And also buried here was the first pastor of the church, Reverend Ainsworth, and some other notables. But again, here's an example of a man who was a slave. He bought his freedom. He didn't live with hatred and bitterness. He made his way in life and impact lots of people. And today there's actually a lecture series named in his honor in Jaffrey, which is well attended. And there was a few books you can find on Amazon. Just do a search for Amos Fortune. There's a children's book and another book, a biography of him.